Hey there, YouTube. Bed Bath & Bongs here. Thank you for joining me. I just wanted to start off by thanking all of my 31 subscribers. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. You guys keep me going. Only reason I keep posting. If I didn't have you guys, then I probably wouldn't be doing this as long as I have been. But yeah, thank you for joining me. For those of you who watched my last video on the 8 values quiz concerning your political compass, today we're going to be getting a little more in depth. We're going to be doing something from the same organization, but this one is for specifically those with left values, which I would fall under. So it is a leftist quiz inspired by and based upon the 8 values quiz. It seeks to identify your position on the left-wing spectrum. If you're not a leftist, this quiz is obviously not suited for you. Same deal, blah blah blah. There are 72 questions in this test. What are the values? Revolution versus reform. Scientific versus utopian. Central versus decentral. International versus national. Party versus union. Production versus nature. And conservative versus progressive. Alrighty, let's begin. But before we do that, I do want to take a quick moment to recognize a really great brand that I've tried recently. It's called a Holo. You've probably seen my review on their batter. That's what I'm going to be smoking on tonight as well, and probably for a little while. It is very potent. It's kind of changed my mind on spending money on the little bit higher quality dabs, because it is just fantastic. So I'm going to go and take a little dab before we go ahead and do this quiz. So yeah, as you can see here. Oh, there we go. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Left values represented with a series of statements. With each one, click the button with your opinion on it. Got it. Reforming capitalist society to achieve better rights for workers is desirable. Strongly agree. Revolution is the best way of achieving a socialist society. Revolution implies violence. I don't necessarily agree with that. If it can be peaceful, I'd rather it be done peacefully. Disagree. The negative consequences of a revolution generally outweigh the advantages. Neutral, because it depends. Liberal democracy is a viable way of achieving a socialist society. I agree. Socialist revolution is made inevitable by the conditions of capitalism. Not necessarily. I don't like the word inevitable. Disagree. Workplace democracy within capitalism is an acceptable alternative to a complete socialization of the economy. Yes, I would agree. I would prefer that. depending on what you mean by the socialization of the economy. I think within corporations it would be better for workers to have more power, just generally. I agree. Revolutionary violence is acceptable as long as the final outcome is positive. No, I believe you should only commit violence in defense of yourself. If someone is coming at you and attacking you unjustifiably, then you have the right to attack them. But beyond that, no, I disagree. Redistributing wealth away from the wealthy through taxes is a viable way of defeating inequality. I strongly agree. Modern social democracy is a betrayal of left-wing values. Disagree. I feel like they're talking about the Nordic countries. When they say modern social democracies, that's what they sound like. Norway, places like that. I'm going to say disagree. I think they're pretty great countries. What other left-wing countries are you going to refer as great social democracies? Like Cuba? I mean, Cuba's nice. I'd rather live in Norway or Sweden, I'm just saying. But, I mean, oppressed people have the right to engage in a violent uprising when all other options have been exhausted. I suppose. It seems like a vague question, but I generally agree with that statement. Means of production such as factories and farms must be publicly owned. Disagree. They can be publicly owned if you can do that in some peaceful way. I mean, possibly, but you shouldn't force farms away from people. Material conditions and needs are the dominant drive behind socioeconomic changes. Disagree. I think people fighting for those changes is the dominant drive. Socialism can be fully achieved in developed industrialized societies. Disagree. Socialism is a very technical term. It's technically met by quite a few places. I hate to sound like one of these conservatives or fucking, God forbid, Dave Rubin, but I mean, Venezuela is an example, and I know they're not really a true socialist, social democracy. They're a dictatorship, but to people who aren't necessarily agreeing with us, it's semantics to them. But from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs is a good principle. I think it sounds nice. I think it might work out, if you're like in an emergency shelter situation and you need everyone to function 100%, possibly, but just general, no, that stresses people out. You need to let people have freedom to pursue what they want to do. Disagree. It is possible to peacefully convince the ruling class to conform to a socialist society. It's possible, but I feel like it would have to be backed up with the threat of either legal or other repercussions. It's very vague peacefully, but yeah, it's possible. Capitalism will induce its own demise through contradictions that result in crisis. Possibly. It seems like a very absolute statement. I'm going to go neutral. Not necessarily. Class conflict is a force that has influenced much of human history. I agree. The establishment of socialism is a gradual process rather than an instant or rapid one. Again, not necessarily. Sometimes it's fast and violent. very blanket statement. Society is chiefly driven by individuals and ideas. And I suppose, in a way, that a society is made up of those individuals with ideas. Total economic and social equality is realistically possible to achieve. So if that means everyone is making the same exact wage, doing the same exact job, I don't know. You have to give me more details, but I'm going to go neutral on that. An economy is generally designed better when it is organized bottom up rather than top down. I would agree with that. Local planners rather than national planners are more efficient at running a planned economy. Not really sure. A centrally planned economy based around computers is a concept worth investigating. It sounds creepy, but I mean, we already do that with the stock market, so I'm a little confused by the question. I'm a little neutral. In underdeveloped societies, a centrally planned economy is the best way to make rapid progress. Yeah, a lot of the time, I would agree with that. The principles of workplace democracy and self-management are desirable. I agree. The state can be best defined as a monopoly on violence and oppression. Yeah, I mean, the police, they're just another gang on the streets, right? A highly centralized planned economy is not socialism, but rather state capitalism. That very much depends. Seems a very blanket statement. I'm going to disagree on that. Bureaucracy and inefficiency are always inherent in centrally planned economies. I would kind of agree with that. I think anything where you have something carefully planned, you're going to have bureaucracy. It's just the nature of it. It is necessary to establish a dictatorship of the proletariat as a transitionary stage between capitalism and socialism. Wow. A dictatorship of the proletariat. That means we're storming in and murdering people without a trial. I disagree with that. The government should be capable of assigning individuals to workplaces. That's a very odd question. What do they mean by that? They already do that when they hire people. And they assign them, those individuals that they hire, to their workplaces. Unsure. A world socialist republic is a realistic and desirable goal. Desirable, maybe? Realistic? I would disagree. Nationalism and patriotism are impulses that are unacceptable in a socialist society. Not necessarily. I think you can be proud of where you live if you've done a lot to improve it and it's doing well. I don't see any issue with that. Just depends what you mean by nationalism and patriotism. Nationalism I don't like. Patriotism isn't necessarily bad. Unsure. The global socialist movement should be led by a single party or organization. Strongly disagree. Foreign officials have no right to dictate policy in another country. Depends what you mean by that. If you mean by like UN, yeah, neutral. I don't know what you should be able to follow international war crime laws and not be brought before the Hague like many U.S. presidents should have. Open borders between like-minded socialist countries is desirable. Possibly. Depends what you mean. Any socialist country should be dedicated to exporting their ideology abroad. Neutral, again, it depends what you mean. If you mean like Cuba does, where they send their doctors around neighboring countries to help them, I'm okay with that. I'm going to go neutral on that. People of similar cultures should unite in federations or confederations. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Kind of odd, but the international proletariat belongs to no country. It's a very loaded statement. I'm going neutral on that. National liberation or self-determination for all peoples is a good concept. For all people. It's a good concept, I suppose. I'd be willing to sacrifice economic resources in my home country in order to help other countries. Possibly, but our people have to be taken care of first, properly. Disagree, at least for the moment. Socialist political parties should participate in liberal democratic elections. Strongly agree. Trade unions and worker councils should form the basis of a socialist society. It should definitely be a huge part. I'd agree. The leadership of a political parties and the progression towards socialism will always lead to authoritarianism. Strongly disagree. Not always, sometimes. Democratic centralism is an authoritarian organizational structure that disregards the masses. Not necessarily. Only a mass workers' party can achieve any meaningful long-term goals. Not only. Mass spontaneous actions are more effective than carefully planned actions. Not necessarily. I feel like the BLM protests are a little more organized than the Occupy ones were, and they've had way more of an effect. The fact that so many workers vote for bourgeois parties over socialist parties is proof that party politics are no longer relevant. Not necessarily, it just means the bourgeois parties won. Socialized organizations are generally better off when organized loosely and decentrally. Not necessarily. Trade unionism has largely corrupted by the ruling class and is no longer a viable structure for a socialist organization. Disagree. Unions can be good. Climate change is a major global threat that all socialists must fiercely combat. Strongly agree. It affects everyone. Measures to address environmental issues are unacceptable if they result in significant decreases in production and quantity of life. Neutral. It depends. It's a very loaded statement. Like, how much of an how much did it hurt the economy, and how much is it helping people? Are they Norway or are they Venezuela? Very fucking vague. It was foolish to expect renewable energy sources to be able to replace fossil fuels. Strongly disagree. Industrialized farming practices must be abolished, even if it leads to lower outputs. I don't know about abolished. Depends which practices. They should definitely treat the chickens better and shit. Neutral. It would be important to implement extensive environmental protections as part of achieving socialism. To implement extensive as part of... Yeah, strongly agree. Experimental and environmentally friendly food sources like cultured meat are worth investing in. What the fuck does that have to do with my politics? Agree, I suppose. Very strange. Personal motor vehicles such as cars should be replaced with free public transport. I don't think you should take everyone's cars away. I've seen some of the ideas, these utopian futures where in cities it's only public transportation, but I don't know. I don't know if I agree. I'm going to disagree with that. It is acceptable for humanity to suffer some notable extent in order to preserve the natural ecosystem. In a way, I mean, if we can't quite make as much money off fossil fuels, then yes. Agree. We must radically alter our food consumption in order to limit the exploitation of nature. We need to change the way we eat, for sure, and that's coming from my tubby ass. Human population growth must be curbed to prevent an ecological disaster. Must be curbed. Human population growth must be curbed to prevent an ecological disaster. I mean, it's already being curbed just naturally. I disagree. I don't think... It sounds like some Bill Gates stuff. We don't want any of that Q stuff around here, okay? I don't want you to say anything to provoke those fucking people, please. Some small-scale destruction of nature is acceptable if it notably benefits humanity. What does that mean? Disagree, because it sounds weird. Humanity must return to the primitive ways of the past to overcome long-term climate issues. Must return. Overcome long-term. Must return to primitive ways of the past to overcome long-term climate issues. No, not necessarily. Look at solar. Look at wind. We must accept that the socialist states of the 20th century failed to seriously address environmental issues. I mean, yeah, they had a lot of other issues to deal with, but yeah, fine. The scientist is more... Sorry, the science is a little more settled nowadays, I feel, but... Alright. The oppression of LGBTQ plus people is a major issue that needs to be seriously addressed. It is. A lot of people do not like gay people, and that is just a fact. I know people currently. I'm not going to name anybody. You know, I'm not going to call people out on my podcast, especially when they're not even necessarily bad people. I just don't like this particular opinion. But I know people who are grossed out by gay people. Like, they think they're morally bad and there's no way their mind can be changed. And that's, like, not... I mean, it's not mainstream, but it's not... Like, it's not common, but it's not uncommon. It's just... It's sad that they're able to view an entire group with such a blanket condemnation. I don't even look at conservatives that way. And I'm a little grossed out by some of their opinions. So I get pretty angry sometimes. I've gotten in some fights here and there, but I've never willingly wanted to hurt someone because of who they are. It's not my nature. I find it gross. The oppression of LGBTQ plus people is a major issue that needs to be seriously addressed. Strongly agree. Traditional gender roles, such as women being homemakers, need to be overcome. Sort of, if they don't want to do it. But if they want to be a homemaker for their husband, then it's up to them. Isn't that part of what being a feminist is? Is that women have choices? Go neutral with that. Depends what you mean. Marriage is a patriarchal social construct that should be phased out. Disagree. As a married man, I don't disagree with that. Abortion is an immoral act that should be banned or significantly limited. Strongly disagree. Religions overall have a mostly positive effect and should remain influential in society. Disagree. Minority populations should receive special legal protections. Neutral, because it depends what you mean. I think minority populations should receive 100% the same legal protection as everyone else. If you mean like certain hate crime laws, maybe. It depends. Neutral. Socialist government has no right to disrupt religious or cultural traditions in any situation. Strongly disagree. There's a little story from years ago about this. It's not the first time. It used to be a tradition among some Hasidic rabbis where they would cut the foreskin off of the baby's penises. I think it's called a bris. And then they would suck the foreskin. Not necessarily even sexual, even in their strange viewpoint. It's just was part of their tradition that they would suck the foreskin off the baby's dick. And there have been cases where these old rabbis, who I guess have STDs in their mouth, give these babies STDs in their newly cut penises. Super fucking gross. You should be locked up for life. Just because you're religious doesn't mean you get to be gross, weirdo, illegal freaks. Just saying. Prisons are oppressive and antiquated institutions that need to be abolished. Disagree. I think private prisons need to be, but you do need some. I'm sorry, there are people that are violent, super violent. Those are the people that I feel like need to be locked in prison, or people that are unnecessarily, unjustifiably violent. Policies that enable mass immigration are naive and should not be implemented. Disagree. It depends. Well, mass immigration? Neutral. It depends. I want to know the numbers. I want to know the specifics. It's very vague. You cannot achieve a socialist society without also making significant social progress. I mean, yeah. You need to wake people the fuck up. So, left-wing results. Between revolutionary and reformist, I'm more of a reformist. 73.5% to revolutionary, 26.5%. So I could be a revolutionary. I just have to be poked enough, I guess. Utopian to scientific, I am more on the utopian side. Funny enough, look at that. I wouldn't expect that. 62.5% utopian, 37.5% scientific. On the neutral. Central, which is the communist side, to the decentral side, which is more on the anarchist side of left-wing politics. I'm more on the anarchist side, I guess. 55% decentralized to 45% centralized. So I like structure, but not too much structure. I don't know. Between international and national, I'm split right down the middle. Apparently, I don't want a one-world government, but I am like an EU kind of guy. I don't know. I guess that's what that means. Partisan. 63.5% partisan to 36.5% union. Ecological. Production to nature. I'm more on the natural side of things. 65.3% to production 34.7%. And then on the progressive range, from conservative to progressive, I'm at 72.1% to 27.9%. Leading, of course, to this awesome, amazing result that I was hoping to achieve. Democratic socialism. Democratic socialism is a form of socialism that seeks to utilize liberal democracy as a means to achieve a socialist economy and society. Democratic socialists reject revolution and a centrally planned economy, instead supporting moderate social ownership in the form of publicly owned utilities and democratic workplace self-management. 98% match. Nice. And I'll be taking a little dab. Thank you so much for joining me, everybody. One of those dirty sock dems. One of those dirty, no good sock dems. How dare I? One of those pot smoking sock dems. Thank you for joining me, everybody.